Hey, so well, not just watched, I watched it a while ago, but I watched, the trial of the Chicago Seven, and, since it was late at night when I finished it, I didn't really have time to talk about it, because if I would have reviewed it then, uh, I would have been extremely quiet and you wouldn't have been able to hear a word I said because everyone else would have been sleeping and I wouldn't have wanted to wake them up. And if I would have been louder and woken them up, then they would have all gone really mad at me. So I figured it would be best to just save it for the morning. So here I am, the morning after, having watched it, that is. And it was good, but like I can't help but feel kind of disappointed because and I felt this way after watching the trailer too for it because I know Aaron Sorkin, the writer director, can do so much better. Uh, and while I hadn't seen him as a director do much better than this is definitely his best directorial film. As a writer, I've seen him definitely do much better than this because The Social Network and Steve Jobs are both like some of the best written films I've ever seen, and this one in no way can ever live up to either of those in terms of writing, or directing actually. But that's kind of what happens when you have two people to share the load instead of just one. Uh, the directing is always fine in the movies he writes and directs, but the writing is always where he's shined. But it always feels a little blunted, like no, I mean a little dulled. Oh dear, I'm sorry. It always feels like his writing is a little bit dulled in the ones he writes and directs because he's focusing on many more things. So he's not as exceptional in any one thing he does because he's doing multiple. So the films don't turn out as good. Like Molly's Game is my least favorite of his movies, and that brings us to this movie. And it's definitely better than Molly's Game, but not as good as The Social Network or Steve Jobs. The cast is all just grade A excellence. You got a lot of famous names in here. Uh, some of them are recent celebrities. Some of them have been famous for a really long time. All of them bring their A game here, and it's great. Uh, there's also like a lot of good drama here. It does a good job at like keeping you invested and like keeping you like offended at the injustice that's going on and making you actually care about what's going on because it's a real life event that happened and all these other things that like movies should do. It does. But I can't help but feel like this is out of all the rare directors films the most studio product feeling film. It all feels like a little predictable and cheesy and cliche at the end of the day. And like I couldn't like help that feeling even though it feels like probably the best version of a studio film, like of a bad studio film, I mean. But but still one nonetheless, if that makes sense. Uh cuz like it hits all those really familiar beats that all the bad movies seem to hit. Only this one's actually good. So because it makes you actually care instead of just groaning and roll your eyes and you're kind of with them at that point. So you're actually like they can't just get away with this and then when the main characters kind of win, you're like, yeah. So it is kind of like I don't know. It does what every other movie has done, but does it in a way where, unlike those other movies, you care about this one, which is weird because I don't know. It's hard to pick apart and dissect why it makes you care because I'm not really sure. I think it's because it's based on a real story, and when you know that, it helps. The writing is like kind of touch and go because some of the lines are really good, and then some of them are just too on the nose, just far too like cheeky and cheesy. Like they're trying to get a reaction out of you, and it just feels like more funny than it is like like it's just trying to get a reaction out of you, some of the writing, and I don't know, what initially seemed like great in his earlier movies is now like I'm starting to see the flaws of in his writing style, where he tries to go for like the really big lines, the one-liners, I guess I'd call them, because like these are like the aw snap moments of the movie where like they just drop like a little bombshell line on one another, where it's almost like they drop like these lines like they're insults on one another. uh it's hard to describe. It's a lot of like trailer moment lines, uh but they're just not as charming anymore. They feel more forced and cheesy, as I mentioned before, so it's hard to see as much of the appeal. uh but like the movie is still like worth watching for sure. It's well paced and there's a lot of good stuff in there. It was just I've noticed more of the bad lately with Aaron Sorkin. And I don't know if it's necessarily his fault, since he's been taking up a lot more responsibilities when making his own movies, which is good. He's definitely still trying, which is good. Uh, it's just like I feel like the strength of this movie more so lays within the cast. Oh dear, why does it keep falling my phone? Uh, and yeah, I'd give this one a light 8 out of 10, maybe 7.75 out of 10. I'm not quite sure. Cuz it is like still well paced. I might be making it sound like a bad movie cuz I keep harping on the negatives, but there was still a lot I liked about the movie. It's kind of like a movie where I'm 50-50 on, where it's like there's about as much I like about as I dislike about that I can put my finger on, at least. It's just a very hard movie to review because it's like it feels a little average, but I realize that it is slightly above average, so I want to review it as such. Uh, but yeah, there's it's as far as Netflix movies goes, it is one of the better ones. I'd recommend it. Yeah. If you have Netflix, might as well give it a shot, right?